Scorch Trials, Chapter 39, on this PDF, page 135. Despite everything he'd been through, Thomas couldn't remember the last time he'd been at such a loss for words. What? How? He stammered, trying to get something out. Minot smiled, a very welcome sight, especially considering how horrible the guy looked. "We'd just found you. Did you think we were going to let these bunch of shuck faces do anything to you? You owe me. Big time." He walked over and started cutting the tape. "What do you mean you just found us?" Thomas was so happy he wanted to giggle like an idiot. Not only were they rescued, his friends were alive. They were alive. Minot kept cutting. "George has been leading us through the city, avoiding cranks, finding food." He finished up with Thomas and went to free Brenda, still talking over his shoulder. "Yesterday morning, we kind of spread out, spying here and there. Frypan was peeking around the corner into that alley up there, just as those three shanks pulled a gun on you. He came back. We got mad, started planning our ambush. Most of those shucks were wasted or asleep." Brenda pushed her way out of the chair and past Minot as soon as her tape was cut. She started toward Thomas, but hesitated. He couldn't tell if she was just mad or worried. Then she came the rest of the way, ripping the tape off her mouth as she reached his side. Thomas stood up, and immediately his head pounded again, the room swaying, making him sick. He plopped back into the chair. "Oh, man, anybody got some aspirin?" Minot only laughed. Brenda had made her way to the bottom of the stairs, where she stood with arms folded. Something about her body language did make her look angry. Then he remembered what he had said to her right before passing out from the drug. Oh, crap, he thought. He'd told her she could never be Teresa. "Brenda?" he asked sheepishly. "You okay?" No way was he going to bring up their odd dance in that conversation in front of Minot. She nodded, but didn't look back at him. "I'm fine. Let's go. I want to see George." Short clips for words, no emotion in them. Thomas groaned, glad to have the pain in his head as an excuse. Yeah, she was mad at him. Actually, mad might be the wrong word. She looked more hurt. Or maybe he assumed too much and she didn't care at all. Minot came up to him, offered a hand. "Come on, dude. Headache or no headache, we need to go. No telling how long we can keep the shuck prisoners up there quiet and still." "Prisoners?" Thomas repeated. "Whatever you want to call them. We can't risk letting them go until we get out. We've got a dozen guys holding more than 20. They aren't too happy. They might start thinking they can take us pretty soon, once they get rid of their hangovers." Thomas stood up again, this time much more slowly. The pain in his head rocked and throbbed like a steady drum, seeming to push on his eyeballs from behind with every thud. He closed his eyes until things quit spinning around him. He sucked in a deep breath, looked at Minot. "I'll be fine." Minot flashed him a smile. "Such a man! Come on." Thomas followed his friend to the stairs. He paused beside Brenda, but didn't say anything. Minot peered back at Thomas with an expression that said, "What's up with her?" Thomas just shook his head slightly. Minot shrugged, then stomped his way up and out of the room. But Thomas stayed back with Brenda for a second. She didn't seem to want to move just yet, and she refused to meet his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said, regretting the harsh words from right before passing out. "I think I said something kind of mean." Her eyes snapped up to meet his. "You think I give a crap about you and your girlfriend? I was just dancing, trying to have some fun before everything went bad. What, you think I'm in love with you or something? Just dying till the day you take me to be your crank bride? Get over yourself." Her words were so full of rage that Thomas took a step back, as hurt as if she'd slapped him. Before he could respond, she disappeared upstairs, all heavy footsteps and sighs. He'd never missed Teresa so badly as at that moment. On a whim, he called out to her with his mind, but she still wasn't there. The smell hit him even before he entered the room where they danced, like sweat and vomit. Bodies littered the floor, some sleeping, some huddled together and shivering, some even looked dead. George, Newt, and Eris were there, standing guard, slowly turning in circles with knives drawn and pointing. Thomas saw Fry Pan and the other gladers too. Though his head still throbbed, he felt a rush of relief and excitement. What happened to you guys? Where have you been? Hey, it's Thomas, Fry Pan roared, as ugly and alive as ever. Newt came up to him, gave a sincere smile. Glad you're not bloody dead, Tommy. I'm really, really glad. You too, Thomas realized with a weird numbness that this was his life, what his life had become. This was how you greeted people after a day or two apart. Has everyone made it so far? Where'd you guys go? How'd you get there? How'd you get here? Newt nodded. Still 11 of us, plus George. Thomas's questions came faster than anyone could answer. Any sign of Barkley and the rest of them? Were they the ones who set off the explosion? George answered. Thomas saw that he stood closest to the door, holding a very nasty-looking sword that was currently resting on the shoulder of Tall and Ugly himself. Ponytail was next to him, and they were both curled up on the ground. Haven't seen 'em since. We got away pretty quickly, and they're too scared to come deeper into the city. The sight of Tall and Ugly had set off a small alarm inside Thomas. Blondie. Where was Blondie? How would Minot and the others have dealt with his gun? He looked around but couldn't find him anywhere in the room. Minot, Thomas whispered, then motioned for him to come closer. Once he and Newt were both right next to him, he leaned in. The guy with really short blonde hair seemed like the leader. What happened to him? Minot shrugged and looked at Newt to answer. Must have got out, Newt replied. A handful did. We couldn't stop all of them. Why? Minot asked. You worried about him? Thomas looked around, lowered his voice even further. He had a gun. He's the only one I've seen with something worse than a knife, and he wasn't very nice. Who gives a clunk? Minot said. We'll be out of this stupid city in an hour, and we should go. Now. That sounded like the best idea Thomas heard in days. Okay, I want to get out of here before he comes back. Listen up, Minot called out as he stepped away, walking through the crowd. We're leaving now. Don't follow us, you'll be fine. Follow us, you'll be dead. Pretty easy choice, don't you think? Thomas wondered when and how Minot had taken back the leadership role from George. He looked over at the older man and noticed Brenda standing silently next to the wall, staring at the floor. He felt so bad about what had happened the night before. He really had wanted to kiss her, but for some reason he'd felt disgusted at the same time. Maybe it was the drug. Maybe it was Teresa. Maybe it was... Hey, Thomas! Minot was yelling at him. Dude, wake up! We're leaving! Several gladers had already walked through the door and into the sunlight. How long had he been out from the drug? A full day? Or just a few hours since morning? He moved to follow, stopping by Brenda and giving her a little push. He worried for a second that she wouldn't come with them, but she only hesitated a moment before heading out the door. Minot, Newt, and George waited, keeping guard with their weapons until everyone but Thomas and Brenda were out. Thomas watched at the doorway as the three gladers backed away, slowly sweeping the tips of their knives and swords back and forth as they did so. But it didn't look like anyone was going to put up a fuss. They were all probably ready to move on, just glad to be alive. Everyone gathered in the alley away from the stairs. Thomas stayed close to the top step, but Brenda made her way to the other side of the group. He swore he'd get her alone as soon as they were away and safe and have a long talk. He liked her, wanted to be her friend if nothing else. More importantly, he now felt about her much the way he'd felt about Chuck. For some reason, a feeling of responsibility for her had overcome him. Make a run for it. Thomas shook his head, realizing that Minot had been talking. Daggers of pain shot through his skull, but he focused. There's only about a mile left, Minot continued. These cranks aren't so hard to fight after all, so let's... Hey! The shout came from behind Thomas, loud and screechy, filled with more than a hint of lunacy. Thomas spun around to see Blondie standing down the bottom step by the open door, his arm extended. His white-knuckled fingers held the gun, surprisingly steady and calm. It was pointed directly at Thomas. Before anyone could move, he fired, an explosion that rocked the narrow alley with a thunderous boom. Pure pain ripped through Thomas's left shoulder.